The lecture hall of the Galactic Institute of Xenobiology seated 400 students from 37 species. On most mornings, it smelled of methane mist, ionized copper, and the faint sulfur that the Vreth delegation secreted when nervous. It was, by all accounts, the most prestigious academic hall on Station Orion 9. On this particular morning, it smelled like blood. Professor Nyara Dai, a Kelvian elder with 6 articulated arms and eyes the color of dying stars, stood at the front of the room and watched the doors with growing unease. She had been teaching xenobiology for 43 standard cycles. She had dissected creatures from gas giants. She had cataloged parasites that could hollow out a moon colony in weeks. Nothing had prepared her for this. The doors swung open. John walked in. He was human, the species that the Institute still formally classified under the subheader Fragile Bipedal Mammals, Tier 3 Survivability. He stood approximately 1.8 meters tall, which was unremarkable. He had dark hair, calloused hands, and the unhurried walk of a man who had long ago stopped being impressed by anything. Over his right shoulder, he carried the Vorkai. The room went absolutely silent. The Vorkai, Predator Maximus Vorkai, in the Institute's taxonomy, was a creature native to the death jungles of Hate 6. It resembled, very roughly, what might happen if a crocodile mated with a wolf and their offspring decided to grow 6 limbs and armor plating. Its jaws could shear through reinforced durasteel. Its hide was rated to survive mid-level plasma discharge. It had hunted the apex predators of 3 separate ecosystems into extinction. It was, according to every xenobiology text in the known galaxy, unkillable by any species below Tier 7 classification. Humans were Tier 3. The Vorkai was draped across John's shoulders like a large, heavy scarf. It was not dead. Its eyes, all 4 of them, were open. Its breathing was slow, and its massive tail hung down John's back, swaying gently with each step he took. It looked comfortable. John walked to the front row, set his bag down, pulled out a datapad, and sat. Professor Nyaradai's 6 arms had all frozen in different positions. Beside her, the holographic display showing today's lesson, Prey Species Behavioral Adaptations, flickered, as if the station itself was unsure whether to continue. Mr. John, she said carefully, in the measured tone she reserved for situations that had no precedent in her 43 years of teaching. What is that? This is Hector, John said. He reached up and scratched the Vorkai behind what appeared to be an ear, a fold of armored hide near the base of its skull. The creature made a sound like a rock slide settling. Low, resonant, almost like a purr. He doesn't like being alone. My apartment neighbor complained about the noise, so I figured I'd bring him to class. From the back of the room, a Vreth student made a small, involuntary sound and secreted so much stress sulfur that 2 students on either side of it quietly stood up and moved. You, Professor Dai said slowly, brought a Vorkai to class. He's well behaved, John said. Mostly, Mr. John. She set down her data stylus. A Vorkai killed an entire Threnic survey team of 9 individuals on Hate 6 in 2287. It destroyed a Class 4 containment unit on Pelos Station. The Institute lost 3 researchers attempting to study one remotely. Yeah, Hector had a rough couple of years before I found him, John said. He adjusted the creature's weight on his shoulder with the casual ease of someone repositioning a backpack. He was juveniled out of his pack. They do that sometimes, kick out the young males. He was starving, dehydrated, and had a piece of Threnic survey equipment embedded in his 3rd left leg. I removed it, fed him. He kind of followed me home. The silence in the room had taken on a new quality. It was not the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of an entire room of alien students leaning, infinitesimally, forward. Near the back, Sarah, one of only 3 other human students at the Institute, pressed her knuckles against her mouth to hide her grin. She had heard this story before. She had been there for part of it. She still wasn't sure whether John was the bravest human alive or simply the most stubborn. Knowing John, it was probably both. You removed an embedded foreign object, Professor Dai repeated, from the leg of a juvenile Vorkai. Junior Vorkai, John corrected. He was maybe 4 meters at the time. Smaller. And he was in enough pain that he wasn't really focused on me. I used forceps and a lot of patience. He paused. And I did lose a boot. He bit through it. but I'd already pulled my foot out, so. The Vorkai, Hector, chose this moment to lift his massive head and look slowly around the room. 400 alien students experienced a sudden, collective instinct to become very, very still. His gaze settled on John's datapad. He sniffed it once. Then he laid his head back down on John's shoulder with the resigned air of a creature that had long since accepted that its human did strange things and had decided to be present for them anyway. He's actually very calm in new environments, John said. As long as I'm here. Because he imprinted on you, Professor Dye said. Something in her voice had shifted. The alarm was still there, but underneath it, curiosity. Old, deep, professional curiosity. She moved closer, one careful step at a time, until she was 3 meters away. A Vorkai imprinted on a human. Tier 3. Someone whispered from the middle rows. It was a Keth student. He said it the way someone might say impossible. Tier 3. John agreed pleasantly. He looked up at the professor. Is this going to be a problem for class? Because I can sit near the door if it makes people nervous. Professor Dye was now 2 meters away. She was studying Hector with the expression of a scientist watching a law of physics politely ignore itself. Her stylus had reappeared in one of her 6 hands, and she was taking notes. The Vorkai's posture is completely relaxed, she said quietly, more to herself than to the room. The respiration rate is low. Resting state. She looked at John. You said he was noisy in your apartment? He gets anxious when I leave, John said. Paces. Knocks things over. He broke my kitchen counter last week. Just leaned on it, and it gave way. He experiences separation anxiety, Professor Dye said. I mean, I don't want to project, John said, but yeah. Basically, Sarah, in the back, could no longer hide her grin. She had watched John spend 3 hours one evening sitting very still on the floor of his apartment while Hector pressed his enormous head against John's chest and breathed slowly, because John had come home late and the creature had worked himself into a state. John had sat there until Hector calmed down, then had quietly said, I know, buddy, I know, and scratched him behind that same ear fold, and Hector had made the rock slide sound and gone to sleep. She had said, afterward, you know he could kill you in about 4 seconds, right? John had said, he won't. She had asked how he could possibly know that. He had looked at her the way humans sometimes looked when they were about to say something that sounded simple and meant everything. Because I haven't given him a reason to. Professor Nyaradai taught her class that morning with a live Vorkai in the front row. She modified the lesson on the fly. Prey species behavioral adaptations became imprinting, trust bonds, and interspecies behavioral modification. And by the end of the lecture, she had 12 pages of new notes and had already submitted a research proposal to the Institute board. Hector slept through most of it. Afterward, when the other students had filed out in the careful, wide-arc path they had unanimously agreed upon to avoid passing too close to the front row, Professor Dye stopped John at the door. Mr. John, she said, the formal classification of Homo sapiens as Tier 3 survivability. He looked at her. I'm going to recommend, she said carefully, that the committee revisit it. John smiled. It was a small, tired, genuine smile. The smile of a man who had never particularly cared about classifications. I think, he said, Hector would appreciate that. He walked out. On his shoulders, 400 kilograms of apex predator swayed gently with each step, content, calm, and completely at peace with the universe, because the universe contained one human who had looked at something unkillable and decided, with characteristic and total stubbornness, to be kind to it anyway.